they wouldn't put it in all the movies if it didn't sell, right? So I hope the clickbait worked. And even though, yes, the title is racy and Jurassic Park is full of the reproductive act, there's more to it than that. And I love movies because of that. Obviously, on its surface, it's a film about man's hubris, right? Like the scientific endeavor. Man goes forth and discovers, and then when he discovers, he automatically puts it into use. He makes it a weapon. He makes it entertainment. He makes it, just a terrible commodity that's loosed upon the world without any thought, even though great minds have brought it about. Then you take a level down and you might say, well, actually, this is a reflection on the movie-making process itself. Spielberg, the director, who is trying to tell his deep and moving stories, has to be able to sell them to not just a wider audience, but to movie houses to get the funding to make them. And even if he wants to tell a deeply nuanced story, he's got to have some way to draw in the big bucks. And you can see how he parallels that of the park's creator, Hammond, how the whole mission, Hammond's whole mission throughout this movie is that he's trying to get the funding to take something that he's already created, this great idea, and try to bring it to people and commodify it and make merchandise so that the kids like it. But what's the story that Spielberg's really trying to tell? I mean, certainly, yes, the hubris of science is there, but also reproduction. You know, the sexual act, sexual power, sexual force, sexual vigor. That is at the heart of this film. And I'm going to point out some things, and you're going to be like, I think you're pushing a little too far. Obviously, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, I've got my hammer, and I'm going to show you all the nails throughout this movie. And when I'm done, you might just be convinced. So we got the movie starting off with the lawyer character who's trying to meet someone at this dig site, somewhere in the deep, dark jungle, right? In the heart of darkness. The person that the lawyer is trying to meet isn't there. But why isn't he there?
He had to leave early. He wants to be with his daughter. She's getting a divorce.
So we already see how our offspring can pull us away from great work. But this other person at the site, he's there. And he brings up Grant. He's like, well, you need to go see Grant because we're the same.
He's a digger.
And what does he mean by that? He means that we are people who are devoted to our work. And that's where we're introduced to the figures of Sattler and Grant. And what's their relationship dynamic? Now, pause with me for a second. When I first watched this film, I was a child. I was probably the same age as the children depicted in this film. And there's a lot to do with kids, and there's a lot to do with reproduction. We'll talk about that. When you're a kid, you're not sexualized. You don't have sexual feelings. You don't have these feelings of desire and attraction. So I had no idea that some of these themes were even in there. In fact, I had no idea that the two main science characters, Sattler and Grant, and also Malcom, were all kind of goading each other sexually, like that there was this sexual tension. I didn't even know that Grant and Sattler were together. And I think that even if you watch this film as an adult, you'd be forgiven for not recognizing that these two characters are together, essentially, because they lack a real sexual chemistry. They have a friendship and they have a working relationship, but there's not that tug and push and pull of the sexual energy between them. And we know why, because in the opening shot when they're introduced, she tries to put this handkerchief, he wears a handkerchief around his neck the whole movie, and she tries to put it around him, but she stops. She stops herself from doing what? She wants to tie the knot. But she gives up and she pats his chest because she knows that he doesn't want to tie the knot yet. And why doesn't he want to tie the knot? Because that means children. And what do children mean? Well, children mean chaos, sexuality, the feminine, and I'm not just talking about men and women, but the reproduction, the thing that lives with reproduction, the feminine, and and offspring are chaotic. You bring a child into this world and you don't know what's going to happen to it. You're not able to, all you can do is try to do your best to be a good parent, but ultimately, you're only with your child for a small fraction of its life, and then it goes off to have its own life, and you don't know what that's going to be like. And as we already saw, how a divorce can pull one scientist away from his work, this scientist, Grant, is worried about getting pulled away from his work. That's why he doesn't want to have kids, because his legacy in his mind, just like Spielberg at the time, great movie maker. Who's the child of Spielberg? Can you name Spielberg's offspring? If you have the internet, you could do it, but I don't know who they are. And that doesn't mean that having kids isn't important. It just means that man has this immortality. Humans have this immortality through art and through their craft, and sometimes through their horrible deeds as well, unfortunately. And we see a lot of the male characters, especially in this film, trying to kind of live forever and trying to be obsessed with their legacy and this kind of, maybe you could say it's a Freudian death drive, I don't know, but maybe they're obsessed with trying to put themselves out into the world and a lot less obsessed with their actual genetic DNA offspring. And obviously genetics and DNA plays a huge role in this film, right? We get to the lower levels of this film and we see that it is about sexuality. There's these sexual triggers throughout it. And it's no surprise, because Jurassic Park is not necessarily a horror movie, but certainly has a lot of elements of horror in it. And what do the sort of like, we consider a lot of horror movies to be, I don't know if schlocky is the right word, but just, very commercial, very base level, anything that's base level is like, drinking, sex, debauchery, fear, murder, base level emotions, anger, and things like this that all live at the root chakra, if you will. They all come together. So it's very often you'll see horror movies with very, very, very attractive women being slaughtered because they kind of go together. And just think about how many podcasts and shows there are around murders and unsolved mysteries. And who's the primary target of that audience? Well, it's usually women. Okay, so these two characters, they don't want to get together. They're together in their work, but they're not together in their love and in their romantic union. That's why she goes to tie the handkerchief around his neck, but she stops. She stops herself from doing that. Why? Because he's not ready to tie the knot, even though she is. So they're giving it away. And this is why I love films. They're putting it right out there. Okay, stick with me. There's obviously more. So kids. This is something that comes up throughout the entire film as well. Kids are very present. Hammond says our target audience is kids. They don't say children a lot, and they don't say offspring a lot. They do say kids, and I think that's important. First, we see this kid. This kid, why does Hammond hate this kid? He turns around with disgust. He points at him. He's intimidating this child. Why does he hate children? Because children to him represent being taken away from his great work, his big find, his big discovery that's going to put him on the map. And of course, if you're in academia or if you're in the sciences, you are known through your discoveries. You're known through the development of your craft and your science, and making big discoveries is how your name lasts through the centuries. Okay, so that's what he wants. He doesn't want kids because kids will pull him away from that, or so he thinks. So he really threatens this kid with a knife, with a blade, with a claw, but also, and here's, trigger warning, yes, Jurassic Park is all about sex. And I'm going to talk about it a lot. So, I assume that's why you clicked on the video. The phallus. And what does he do with it? Oh, she's disgusted. He's slicing him up. He's using his vigor and his life force to intimidate this child when he should be, or maybe perhaps ought to be, caring and loving. And we'll find out why he's not in the future. They talk about kids more. He says, oh, they're gross. Basically, kids are expensive distractions, and I don't need that right now, okay? And she kind of laughs it off, even though that's obviously what she wants. Now arrives Hammond in the helicopter, descending from the sky like a god that he is, or God that he wishes to be. He shows that he has no respect for the things that he claims to care about by strewing their work everywhere. He's making them irrelevant. He's recovering. He's coming in like a wrecking ball, and he's recovering their work. He's covering over their work. They try to save it, but he's an unstoppable force. He's just bursting onto the scene. He's reburying the things. He's the things that should be left buried. He's coming in to bury as a foreshadow. And naturally, Grant is very upset with that. So he runs and he walks to his trailer, and he's going to burst in on Hammond, who's already rummaging through his fridge. And what do we see? What does Grant say?
We were saving that!
Obviously, you think, well, Grant's saving that for what? He's saving it for the discovery. But what he's really saying is that this, again, sorry, Jurassic Park's all about sex, that champagne bottle is a phallus. And it pops. Grant was trying to say, hey, I'm saving popping my cork for after the discovery, and then we can talk about kids. But you just come in here and you pop the cork, right? He's like, I was saving that. I was saving the sexual energy. And you just came in here and popped it, right? The phallus. I mean, you're going to say I'm digging here, like I'm digging for dinosaurs. But I'm telling you, there are cues throughout this movie. And if you think this is crazy, well, just stick with me because it gets even crazier. Okay, so he pops it. He says, we're saving that. And he's like, you don't want to save it anymore. You don't need to save it anymore. Grant shows his finger. He does this through the film. He shows the claw, his finger, his phallus, pointing at the doctor. And what does the doctor do? He grabs it and shakes it, saying, like, I'm not intimidated by that. You know what I mean? I'm one with that. I'm connecting at that source with you. Auteur directors like Spielberg, maybe like Kubrick or something like that, these really well-known, powerful directors, there's not a single thing that goes into the frames of movies that doesn't have some meaning. So anyway, now here's the interesting part. They embrace. They have this tension. They don't have this any kind of sensual tension throughout the film, but here they are embracing. You'll notice that they only really touch or embrace when it surrounds dinosaurs or their research. So they're celebrating because they're going to get their funding, right? And now the plot is underway. So we go into the helicopter, and what's the first thing we see? Again, there is the claw, the phallus, the sexual energy, his sexual power being transmitted into his work. And why am I saying that that's so relevant? Well, because obviously there's a very nice leg of Laura Dern right there. Sattler's leg is up and cast over the claw, right? And then in the background, we're introduced to Malcom. Malcom, the dark figure, Malcom Chaos. He's literally a mathematician who studies chaos. He is, for all intents and purposes, chaos in this film. But he's also, but Jeff Goldblum, who's looking right at the claw, brother. He's looking right at the claw. He spies the claw right away. They pan up to him, right? And his character, of course, like I said, is chaos, but he's also a very sexualized, male sexualized character. He's a horn dog, for lack of a better word. He spies the claw. And he says,
so you two dig up dinosaurs?
And what does Sattler say?
Well,
Trying to.
She laughs. You two dig for dinosaurs? And she goes, ha, ha, ha. Now, why would you laugh at that? If someone says, oh, so you're an accountant? Would you go, accountant, and then turn to your partner? No. You'd say, are you an accountant? Yes. I deal with blah, 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 blah. You two dig for dinosaurs? A simple yes would suffice. But she laughs. Because what he's saying is, are you two together? Do you know how to use that thing, buddy? Are you guys getting it on? Are you getting freaky? And she laughs. Because no, they're not. And she looks over at him. I mean, why would you? And why is he giving him the evilest, dirtiest look? Because he's like, stay out of my business, you MFer. Stay out of my business. How dare you ask about my sex life? And he laughs and he laughs and he's looking at Sattler. Right? He does that funny little laugh. Why does he do that? Because he's asking them, you guys get it on? And she goes, no, we haven't gotten it on a long time. And he's like, ooh, sorry to hear that. I get it on all the time. Ha ha. I'm a bad boy. Ha ha. And the lawyer character is covering his mouth, right? Like, why would they be doing that if it wasn't all about sex? Hello? There's this funny laugh. She's laughing. He's trying to laugh along, but he doesn't get it. See, that's the weird thing about Grant. Is like, he's obviously very devoted to his work, but he gives off like a totally asexual vibe. Like, this guy has like no sex appeal and no like sexual mojo whatsoever. And just to prove that, that's what this scene is about. Here we have Malcom, who's so much of a horn dog, he's even feeling up Hammond. He even gives him a little feel. He can't even keep his hands to himself.
I do wish you wouldn't do that.
He points to Sattler and says,
Dr. Sattler, I refuse to believe that you aren't familiar with the concept of attraction.
right? Great attractors. She's talking about mathematics, mathematical attractors, which, of course, this movie is also giving rise to, sort of like giant attractors, these events that kind of like a black hole, when no matter how you approach them, you always sort of bend towards that. And that's his whole theory, you know, like, hey, I mean, life must go on. And so, like, no matter how you slice it, people got to get it on if we want life to go on. And he goes, you know, Dr. Sattler, you obviously know about attraction. And she blushes. And the doctor, you know, the doctor looks at her and she blushes, turning towards her partner, Grant. And the doctor, and Hammond even looks over and says, well, are you like that? You know, it's all a very, again, it's a movie that appeals to children. It's a movie that appeals to broad audiences. So they have to hide these sexual undertones in these conversations. Okay, then they arrive. They're coming in hot. The lawyer puts a seatbelt on. Malcom puts a seatbelt on, even with a little suggestive flair there. I don't know. I mean, you tell me. But what do we find out? That Grant is so asexual. Grant has so little mojo that he grabs two female ends. He can't even buckle his seat. He can't even get what engineers refer to in seatbelts, a male end and a female end. He can't even put those together. He's so sexually incompetent that he can't even, you know, it's just showing you that they're not engaged, right? They're not they're not tying the knot. They're not getting it on. And he can't even find the right seatbelt. This guy is so bad at it that he can't even find the seatbelt. And of course, as we already know, the dinosaurs on the island are all female, and yet they still find a way to reproduce. Grant finds a way to tie his seatbelts together to make it work, just like the dinosaurs will find their way to make it work as two females. It's foreshadowing, but then here, this knowing look from Malcom, he's like, I got her. That's what he's saying to himself. He's like, I know that I'm going to make a move on Dr. Sattler, and I know that I can because this guy is a total loser. Here we go. So they arrive, and let's pause just for a second to give it up for the fact that those Jeeps, the branding. So when they first arrive, obviously Hammond wants them to be wowed, and they see the brontosaurus. Now, here's the famous scene, of course. Da 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 dum bum 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 bum. Grant sees it. He's amazed. He's taking his shades off in pure amazement. All right, you clicked on the video. It's all about sex, right? Well, here we have Sattler, and she's sitting examining the leaf. Notice how, Grant is standing. She's, I won't say kneeling, but she's definitely at kneeling height. And what does he do? He reaches his hand down, grabs her head, turns it towards him, or the dinosaurs, and her mouth is agape. Well, okay, tell me I'm stretching it, but whatever. The whole point is that he is exercising a kind of rugged, I mean, I don't know how many times I can say sexuality in a YouTube video before it goes against some kind of rules here, but like, he's exercising that kind of masculine, you know what, but only in the context of his work, just like they only touch and they only embrace when it has to do with dinosaurs or his career, essentially. So she's in shock. And you're saying that was a little much, okay? That was a little much. You're reading into it too much. Lest we forget that they go on that little ride inside of the main building of the park where they see the how it's done. They see the tour of how, the ride tour that's got the animation and everything. The lawyer leans over to Hammond when they see the scientists, and what does he say?
Are these characters erotica?
What? Are those what are you talking? Automatons? Animatronics? Yeah, it's funny he misspoke. A little Freudian slip there, but it's a Freudian slip in case of the movie, because again, this movie is reminding you, hey, this is all about getting it on. This is all about reproduction. Autoerotic. I mean, this is not a coincidence. And he talks about they slip in autoerotic. It's a funny moment. But you'd be forgiven for not putting it together with all these other moments. I mean, hello, autoerotic. Why, out of everything that they could have scripted for that moment, did they decide to put that in? And what do they see next? Eggs. They see eggs, the precious eggs of life. Mammals and reptiles alike, both using eggs, one internal, one external. And what does Sattler say as they're going by?
Can we see the unfertilized eggs?
Chocolate.
Wait. Can we at least see the unfertilized eggs? She says. This woman who is way more than ready to have kids, what does she want to stop and see? At least show us the unfertilized eggs, she points out, with her partner right there. She's baby crazy. She's got baby fever. Oh, unfertilized eggs. We've got to see those. I mean, again, you have to put the right glasses on when you see the film. Obviously, I'm skirting over a lot of the other themes about, destruction of the natural world and the commodification of things that should be respected and preserved. Man playing God and whatnot. Out of all the things that she says, hey, we should stop and take a look at, unfertilized eggs. Well, she's got a bunch of those, right? Just pointing it out. And they want to stop and have a look, but they're told that they can't. So what do? They team up together and they break the machine, right? They break the ride. Obviously, subtle, not so subtle foreshadowing that the ride can be broken out of and will be broken out of, and things will go off the rails. They rush over to the eggs. They witness the birth. Here we see Hammond playing God. He's like, I want to imprint on all the baby dinosaurs. I'm here for every birth. Right? Like God, like he's like the all father. I mean, there's no coincidence that he's got the white beard and, has this sort of look about him. He's there because he wants to be the father to every birthed dinosaur. And here, the thing of terror, the raptor that's being born. I mean, I believe that is a raptor being born. The thing that will be terrorizing them later in the film is now being fawned over as being very cute. This horrific lizard. They're in shock. Oh my gosh, it's so cute. And they're again, there's such baby fever going on that even this gross lizard. Oh, I mean, sure. I mean, lizards being born can be cute, but you see they're pouring this motherly energy into something that turns to horror. Which is in essence what Grant is worried about. And I guess in a way you could also say that he's worried that his partner in his partner in digging up these dinosaurs will also be taken away from him. He will be distracted by the children, that his offspring, but also Sattler will be taken away from the work. So he'll lose his partner in the research when she has children, right? And the research is more important than this offspring. His legacy with society is more important than his legacy within his own family. And the same goes for Hammond, because we see Hammond caring for these offspring, these dinosaurs, more than he cares for his own children. Wow, they're so happy. They're so ecstatic. And it's also kind of just like that weird dichotomy, like I say, these things will soon be eating them alive. So as further proof that Grant has no place with children, even the machinery of the park grabs the egg out of his hand. And a cute little joke. You know, Spielberg putting the cute little joke in there, saying, you know, even now, like, you're not ready. You know, you're not ready, dude. You're not ready for the responsibility. You're not ready to get it on with your partner. You're not ready for the eggs. Comes in, choop, takes the egg out. Funny little detail.
But, again, how do you know they're all female? Or does somebody go out in the park and pull up the dinosaur skirts?
And now we get to the sort of, you know, part in every movie where the villain has to explain their devious, dastardly plot. And for the characters in the film, this comes in at the sort of luncheon scene. And I won't go over the other themes of the, you know, destruction and man's control over nature, but I will point out, trigger warning, that Malcom tells him that discovery that he's so excited about is a penetrative act.
Oh, what's so great about discovery? It's a violent, penetrative act that scars what it explores, what you call discovery. I call the rape of the natural world.
That's what he's saying. He's saying you are taking the earth and having your way with it. You know, you're not trying to romanticize it. You're not trying to get to know it. You're not trying to bring it in. You're not worried about what the offspring is. Now, it is with no, you know, it is with a full sense of irony that Mr. Chaos, Mr. Sexuality himself is saying these things, because this guy is putting it in anywhere he can. In fact, he's on the island hoping to score with Sattler, and he's talking about how but I guess it takes one to know one, right? Maybe that's the truth. You know, maybe there's some kind of truth in this film. You know, it takes one to know one, and certainly he is, you know, I'm not accusing him of any kind of wrong deeds, but he's certainly not concerned with what happens to his offspring, much like he's accusing Hammond of not being concerned what happens with his offspring. It is clear that this whole thing is based around consumerism, you know, and we can even look at this scene in the lunch as something that Spielberg would have to go through with all the executives, you know, and lawyers of the motion picture houses, you know, having to sell his ideas. Hammond is in the midst of trying to sell his idea. You know, he's trying to get the people who just don't get it to get it. Like, don't you see how wonderful this is? You know, I'm sure Spielberg's very familiar with what it's like to have to get in a room full of people who might not be for what you're doing and try to sell them on how great of an idea this is. And the kids are going to love it. And just think of the merchandising, you know, which Hammond is a little, you know, Hammond just wants to bring about some kind of story, some kind of narrative, some kind of wondrous creation, much like Spielberg wants to bring out, you know, the wonder of cinema. And I don't think that it's any coincidence whatsoever that they're surrounded by projection screens and the light. You know, obviously what happens in the cinema is exactly where they are. You know, you could say that they are in the cinema here. I mean, I don't want to go too far into those other subplots, but that's what makes films. Any film is great because there are these multiple layers. We're going to stick with the sexuality, of course. You horn dogs, we're going to stick to the sexuality. But I would be remiss if I didn't point out how similar this is to a pitch meeting that Spielberg might have to go through. You know, we see how obsessed Hammond is. We can understand how obsessed someone like Spielberg might be, where he wants to tell a story about the beauty of a man starting to realize that maybe his career isn't as important as he thought, and how easy technology can roll over your progress that you thought you were making and make you irrelevant. And that maybe the people that we really want to impress are our partners and our children and the things that are most important. So this is Spielberg's way of coming to terms with being a father. And if you pitch that and you were Spielberg, well, I feel like you might be rejected. I might be like, well, geez, Steve, like, how are we going to, where's the explosions? Where's the fun? How are we going to get people in the seats? Nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to see ordinary people.
In an extraordinary story of ordinary people.
Great film. But you know what I mean? Like, nobody wants to see that. Like, and you have to kind of package it inside of this other, more digestible, more action-packed thing so that, when you first watch the film, you'd be forgiven for not noticing all these things. But then upon further inspection, I mean, any great film rewards you upon further viewing. So we move on to the target audience.
Kids!
Children. His grandchildren that he brings. He's bringing these people to try to approve something. So this is a substance. This is a material. This is a thing which is potentially dangerous. Potentially everything that he was accused of being in that meeting, in that luncheon, that is now being tested in real time by his own genetic offspring. We see how he's putting the DNA of dinosaurs above his own DNA. And there we go. We see Grant pointing his finger again, just like he did at Hammond. Only this time, it's speaking to his impotence, is what you need to understand. The finger being shook by Hammond earlier, and the finger towards the kid. It's speaking towards his impotence, his inability to buckle the seatbelt is his impotence, his inability to. The fact that he needs a claw as a stand-in is speaking to his impotence, you see? And because all of his energy is being channeled into his work. There we have Sattler looking at him with that, biting her finger, that very knowing, very telling look, because she's giving him the look of love. She's being coy, she's being playful, and he's just rebuffing all of her advances because he is afraid of his own irrelevance. He's afraid of his own death. He's afraid of his obscurity, and he doesn't understand what the value of children are. Malcolm's character here, the character Malcom, of referencing to King Kong as they go between the gates, and it is very King Kong, but and that not only gives a reference to old Hollywood, of course, and the spectacle. It's obviously ironic that Malcolm comes in the second movie and actually has a King Kong moment where they try to bring the savage beast into the realm, the civilized society. And of course, what does the beast do? He grabs a hold of a woman. So I think that connection is relevant. They enter the park, and then we're introduced to the figure of the saboteur. And I only bring him up here and now because he's being scolded by Hammond, the sort of all-father of the park. He's talking to the saboteur character is childlike. He's petulant, and he's mad that he's not being given his due like he thinks that he ought to be getting. Okay, so he's getting a scolding, He's talking about money, but what does he say to him? He's like, now, bear in mind, this is relevant because sex leads to reproduction and children. It really, I guess you could say that at the base of Jurassic Park is the idea of offspring. But, that's not a really catchy title. And, it's all about offspring. Obviously, it's a better title. It's a catchier thing to bring into bear on a video essay. It's going to catch more eyes if I use the base nature to draw people in and draw you, the listener, in. I mean, it's still relevant, but here we have this father-son dynamic. All of a sudden, here we have Hammond scolding the petulant child who is lazy. He wants to take shortcuts. His desk is a mess. They make a comment about how messy his desk is, like a boy's room. You know what I mean? A total mess. And he's saying, well, it's not my problem if you need more money. If you don't know how to spend your cash, I'm not here to be your dad. You make your own mistakes. You deal with it. Classic dad move. And what does the saboteur say?
Thanks, Dad.
Because he's getting a lecture. Thanks, Dad. I guarantee you this character doesn't have a good relationship with his father. Kids. Like I said before, remember how I said not children but kids? Because What's another meaning of kid? Goat. And what do we have to try to draw the T-Rex out? The goat, right? They bring out the sacrificial goat. They could have had anything. Anything could have been brought up from below to entice the T-Rex, but they brought up a goat. Why? The sacrificial goat. The sacrificial kid. These kids are the sacrifice. I mean, if you look at Tim's character, the young boy, he's the total sacrifice. He gets the worst of it throughout the whole film. The offspring of Hammond, the park creator, his children, his grandchildren, become the sacrificial kids, the sacrificial goats of the whole film to make all this run. It's no coincidence that the goat is selected as the sacrifice in order to entice the dinosaurs. The children, the whole park is built for children, and they are the offering to make this happen. You see, because it wouldn't be enough for scientists to bring back the dinosaur. There has to be a reason. There has to be a way to fund it, right? Just like with the movies, you know what I mean? Nowadays, a movie doesn't seem to get made unless it's part of a franchise, Jurassic Park included, and something that can bring the kids in, something that can bring the demographic in. Older adults are far less likely to see new media and films and keep up with the zeitgeist and the culture than the younger viewers. So in order for this park to happen, it has to be turned into an attraction. In order for Hammond's vision to become reality, he has to sacrifice these children. He has to bring them into the fold. And that's his conflict. As we saw before, it's like it would just be enough for the park it would just be enough for the dinosaurs to exist, but a whole spectacle has to be made out of something that's naturally in and of itself a scientific endeavor, a taking the garden, taking the man as caretaker to man as sort of like this carnival barker that's trying to draw in, and the carnival is synonymous with bringing in the wayward children and being a kind of like meat grinder churning up of these sacrificial kids to make the whole thing go. It's like this horrible self-fulfilling prophecy. And the goat does get taken. The goat gets taken right around the time that the children's lives are threatened. We have Sattler and Malcom's interaction, where because there's a lull, there's some downtime, there's no action, Malcom decides to create some. And so what he does, he starts hitting on Sattler, right? And she, what does she do? She plays right into it. Look at her excitement. Look how close they are. He's already got his hand on her. And and she's playing dumb, right? She's literally playing dumb. He's like, these big math terms, and I'm impressing you. And she's like, even though she is a scientist, she's a doctor. She's like, I'm a little girl. I don't know anything about that. Dr. Malcom, please tell me. And he's like, I'll tell you, baby. Ha ha ha. Oh ho ho. And look at her face. She's looking at him. She looks him up and down. The sexual tension that should be present between her and Grant is being portrayed here. So that she is capable of it and that she's been giving it to Grant the entire time, but he has not been taking the bait. But Malcom is. Look at there. He's touching her hair, flirting with her. Oh, and look how excited she is and willing to play along. And the funny thing is that, of course, Malcom thinks that he's really getting some in this. He really thinks that he's making his moves. But Grant is not interested. He's looking away. And this bad boy, the trope of the bad boy, which ironically, the trope of the bad boy is that the bad boy attracts all the women, but he doesn't end up with one. He sort of like ends up alone. And we see that playing out with Malcom. And we have Sattler playing along. And he, of course, this is just an excuse to touch her and to make moves on her. But it is also valid. Wow, she's really giving it to him. I mean, she's an actor, obviously. Dern is an actress, and she's playing this up. But I mean, she's really giving it to him. She's acting within the film, giving her flirty nature to him, and he's soaking it up, and she's, look at her face. Oh, isn't that amazing? Wow. And then what does she say to Grant?
Hey, Alan, look at this.
She doesn't mean, hey, look at this cool experiment. Look at this cool theory this guy is saying. She's saying, hey, Dr. Grant, look at this. Look at him flirting with me. How does that make you feel? So the other tactic that she's trying is trying to accept the advantages of Malcom so that she can be sort of raise the jealousy or sort of raise the fervor inside Grant. And it doesn't work because Grant wants nothing to do with it. Now he's caressing her, soft skin, they're flirting and teasing, and he's really going in for it. She said, oh, she's really giving it to him. Smiling, genuine smiles, caressing his hand. Grant, not into it. He's not into it. He leaves. And he makes it as though he sees something off in the distance. I mean, this is down to great screenwriting right here. But he makes as though he's seeing something off in the distance, which he is seeing. But just like before, it's like, why do we have to stop to see the unfertilized eggs? Why that? Why did that induce a stop? Whereas this is another example of a stop where he sees something off in the distance, the Triceratops, and that is the reason why he gets out of the van. But of course, the real reason why he gets out of the vehicle is because he doesn't want to be around her game of flirting. So he leaves. And of course, which is great for Malcom because now he thinks he's going to be alone with Sattler. But of course, he soon realizes that the only reason that she was flirting with him is to get to him, and then she leaves because that was her only reason for doing it. And there he is, left to hold the cup with a stupid look on his face because he's been played. And he's saying, who could have predicted the chaos of him leaving the vehicle, but who could have predicted the chaos of me not knowing what I don't know? You don't know what you don't know. Who could have predicted the other factor at play, which is that I'm just a part of this love triangle in order to make Grant jealous. Now they're off. Now, you're going to laugh at this, but you're going to see what I'm talking about when it comes down to Grant's impotence, his inability, his lack of manhood, his lack of sexuality, when the kid comes in and talks about his rival. Which is the worst thing you can do because he cares more about his work than he cares about children. And what does the child do? He says,
and his book was a lot fatter than yours. Was like this.
Yours was fully illustrated.
He even uses his hand. It was this thick. It was this big. You know what I mean? Basically, like, your book, they're tiny. His book, really big. I mean, it's an obvious reference. It's an obvious jab at his ego, and which is another reason to not like kids again. But, it's just another point to goad and show that that Grant is constantly being he's constantly being goaded into saying, you know what? Oh, you think you're so big? I got the stuff. I've got the mojo. But he doesn't. Not yet, anyway. But it's starting to show as the girl falls and he picks it up and he shows care for her and genuine concern. And she latches on to his dismay. And of course, Sattler is eating it up in the background. That's her playing her game and her enjoying the teasing that's happening, biting her tongue. She's literally biting her tongue. She's enjoying Grant being teased by the child, Tim. And, Malcom, you see, he's lost interest in Sattler for a very good reason. Because as we find out later, he's done this to several women. He's been sly and the bad boy and made moves on a lot of other doctors in the field. And left them after they had children, because he divorced them after they had children. Why? Because he doesn't care for his offspring. He does not he loses interest in Sattler when she starts to display mothering instincts. And of course, care and sexuality do not go hand in hand. I mean, that's part of the dilemma of, I guess you could say, of a woman or femininity, is that she has to play both the role of this caretaker, but also this object of desire. And those things kind of are kind of opposed to one another. And once Malcom sees that she's capable of this care for the Stegosaurus and actually doesn't play into those feminine tropes that he's used to, he loses interest, but Grant doesn't because Grant's used to it. And he says, yes, she's always like that. That's why Grant loves her. Now, in no surprise, we go back to the saboteur as he starts his program to reset and shut down the park and open up all the locks, and he's the guy who ruins everything. When he activates the code to start, in the backdrop, if you can see, is a sexy woman in a provocative, erotic pose. She's barely dressed, she's a bombshell blonde, and she's wearing zebra print, and she's on a zebra rug. By no coincidence, right? Zebra often associated with exoticism and kind of wildness, but also zebras are prey. And so she's exhibiting a wild excitement, but also in repose, and she's the prey character. Just like Malcom was hunting Sattler, that's the kind of sexual play of humans where, the woman is sort of like the prey of the man's desires, and there she is. So it's no coincidence, again, that the chaos that's about to erupt in the park is sort of the backdrop of it on his computer is a highly sexualized feminine photograph. So again, making that link between the sexuality and the chaos, maybe like the order of man plans, God laughs, the order that man tries to put onto the world, but the the wild and unpredictable chaos of sexuality and femininity that is present throughout. Now, I'm not endorsing any of these things. I'm just saying that this seems to be the theme that comes up in these sequences of events and the symbols that are presented. And of course, this isn't necessarily a commentary on individual men and women, but just the archetypes, of course. So there we see the automatic connection between the desirable femininity and the chaos unleashed by someone's plan, the saboteur's plan, and the fragility of the egoic construct of the park that sticks out like a sore thumb in nature, Mother Nature, sticks out like a sore thumb, is undermined by the wild chaos here of sexuality. And that theme is driven home, and it will be driven home again even further in the rest of the film. When Malcolm's saying, life finds a way, what he's really saying is all life reproduces, and it finds a way to reproduce. If it didn't, we wouldn't be here. And surely the dinosaurs later, they do find their way to reproduce. Now, in this scene, we expose that Malcolm is this playboy, and that he asks Grant directly the question that we all want to know. He says, "Are you two, and he just lets it trail off. And then Grant says, yeah, he gets defensive. Yeah, we are. Because who can really tell? And he's also, again, playing into an ego challenge of like, well, why aren't you making moves on her, dude? Did you see me in the car with her? She was all over me, bro. And he's like, yeah. Well, then they kind of go into this thing about, do you ever think about having children? And he's like, oh, I've got a bunch of children. I don't raise them. I'm always on the hunt for a new ex-Mrs. Malcom, right? Because that's his whole MO. He's chaos. He brings chaos into these women's lives by impregnating them and leaving. Going back to the computer, of course, there's going to be talk about Oppenheimer here, the inventor, the person associated with inventing the atomic bomb, and what that piece of technology and progress, quote unquote progress, brought to humanity. So we see him dreaming of the boom, dreaming of the bomb, but then there's another note that says beginning of baby boom, right? Baby, reproduction, offspring. Of course, the nuclear age did bring about a baby boom, especially in America. But I think that beginning of baby boom, in terms of the context of the character, seems a little relevant, but in terms of the themes of the film, as I've been driving home, very relevant. Here's just proof that Spielberg must really hate lawyers, because this guy is just made a fool of the entire film, and then he is eaten. Now we have a moment between after the T-Rex attack, we have a moment between Tim and Grant, and he says to him, we're going to climb down this tree, just like coming down from the treehouse. Why did they put this little line in there? Yes, it's funny, but he says...
Did Dad ever build your treehouse?
No.
Meaning that, okay, now we start to understand that maybe Grant didn't have a great relationship with his dad, and that's kind of the reason why he's a bit reluctant to have kids himself. And it's beautifully done because you didn't need a flashback. You didn't need a whole exposition. It's just a few lines of dialogue to make you understand, oh, okay, that's what's got this guy hung up. He didn't have a good relationship with his dad. And we see his foil in that sense of the saboteur character who puts the code into the computer and brings down the whole park. He didn't have a good relationship with his father. Neither did he, but they take two very different paths. And as they come together after the chaos and the excitement, of course, this is an exciting movie. I'm cutting through all that just to get to the parts that have to do with sex. He sits down, and what does he sit on? Ooh, ah! He sits on his own sword. You know, he falls on his own sword. He lives by the sword. He dies by the sword. I mean, that's, of course, another theme of this movie. But you see, he falls on his, the claw, his protection, his thing that he was using to fight against kids. He injures himself on it when he's actually taken the time to protect and embrace children. He's switched from the sort of like hyper-masculine attack mode to the other side of masculinity, which is the caretaker, which is the gardener in a way, caretaking and caring for offspring and the planet Earth. You know, the wild and chaotic Earth, and man coming in to not simply tame it, not simply take hold of it and take what he wants from it, but to understand it and also encourage it to grow, knowing it so well. And here he's embracing the children, and what does he do? But he tosses aside that thing that stood in for his phallus, right? The thing that was the insecurity, and now he's embraced his true masculinity and his desire to have children. Another big part of this is that the children ask him, "What are you going to do now that you're irrelevant, dude? You know, you were digging up dinosaur bones to try to figure out what they looked like, but now we reproduced them, so we already know what they look like. So your whole life is a waste." And then he goes, "My whole life's a waste, huh? I guess I'll just have children," which is kind of a bad way to look at it. But essentially, that's the turning point for the character when he realizes, dang, you're right. Like, there's no point in devoting myself to digging up dinosaur bones anymore. I'm not going to be known for any kind of progress in that field because this guy just put me out of business, so to speak. And of course, the claw falls into the ground. He loses it. He falls asleep and he loses it. The symbology being that he does not need that as a stand-in for his own sexuality. He's going to take a hold of it. He's going to own it now, and he's going to get with Dr. Sattler. Moving on, a blatant reference to consumerism and things made for children. We have this scene where these children almost die, juxtaposed with the scene of things made for children. We see in the scene where the wasting of the ice cream is kind of like the wasting of the potency of Hammond's character and how he's losing out on time in his own life. And he wants to make one great thing while he's alive. You know, the ice cream is going to waste. And he goes on a bit of a rant about, I just really wanted to do it for real this time. He talks about the flea circus, where flea circuses are a lot like films, where nothing that happens on screen is really happening. This is all conjecture. This is all artifice. This is all thousands of people working together to create an illusion that we participate in, right? This is a screen. This is a screen. This is a screen in a screen. None of it's real. None of it's actually happening. It's a capture. It's a manufactured thing that we in our brains, we give up control. We say, I'm willing to suspend my disbelief in order to believe that there are actually fleas who are moving on these animatronic, seesaws up and down. And that's what he says. People buy into it. And then he thought to himself, well, now I want to do something for real. A thing that is actually real, that that people don't have to imagine. That like we always, the thrill of bringing back dinosaurs met with the reality of actual dinosaurs. But as we know, fantasy is a horror. You know, our fantasies are safe in film because they're not real. But once they become real, they become actual horrors. You know, even many of our sexual fantasies that we imagine, were they actually real and not played out in a safe way with consent, would actually be quite horrifying, potentially. Whatever freak stuff you might be into, aside, you know, and no judgment here, of course. But here we see how bringing about these, you know, he thinks that the flea circus is wrong in a sense, and he wants to bring something real into the world. But really, the real thing that he should be looking for, as Laura Dern, as she's all fed up, or Dr. Sattler's all fed up. Will you be quiet, man? You don't understand that your children are dying. People are dying. Those are the people who are valuable. You want people to come and see your dinosaurs, but they're killing everyone. The fantasy has become reality, and it's destroying our realities. It's bringing about an apocalypse to these people's lives. Why can't you see what's really important? And she scolds him to tell him that it's his children that is really important. And then, of course, she says, F it, I might as well enjoy a bit of ice cream while we still have time and while it's going to waste. She's eating the ice cream in her tears. She's getting what she can, thinking, of course, that she might be dying. But Hammond is taken aback by this. I thought I'd throw that in, even though it doesn't quite have to do with sexuality as much as the rest of it. I'm not even going to talk about this part.
Can I touch it?
Moving on. We see that the eggs have reproduced, and now the excitement comes on his face because, of course, it's the excitement of nature. It's the excitement of life itself. The fantasy becoming reality, but it's also Grant now being able to hold the eggs and say, oh, now I'm excited about having kids. Life does find a way. He's excited about bringing about more life into the world, and he's like really taken hold of that idea. And now we have total, this crazy shot. Why do we have this? The sexuality shot of, I don't know, just maybe unnecessary or necessary, depending on how you think about it. But here he is, looking fine.
You've got to pump up the primer handle in order to get the charge.
I just got to say it. I feel like there's a lot of ways to get power restarted, and grabbing a rod and pumping it, literally.
1, 2, 3.
I mean, I know it's a stretch. And I know a lot of this has been a stretch, but come on. I mean, I've been pointing you in this direction so far. And if you've watched all the way to this point, you must see, or perhaps it is my dirty mind alone. I mean, I feel like there's a lot, there could have been a big handle to go up and down. There could have been maybe a crank, but a big long handle to grab. Did you have to put all your body weight into to pump up and down? I don't know. Come on. I mean, you're seeing it. You've seen the movie. You tell me. I just can't imagine that, this is not another reference. Oh boy. They get the power restarted. And here we have a nice little shot of the dinosaur overlaid with genetic code, again showing how this code, this information manipulation becomes the horror. It's a one encapsulating shot to show how the horror has been made through this manipulation. We cracked the genome, but also now what have we released onto the world? I mean, that's ever more present even today as we start to bring back animals from the past. Have you learned nothing from Jurassic Park? Well, we're doing it, and, this should be on everyone's minds, of course. And there we go, the collapse of everything, the iconic shot as they all narrowly avoid death, and jump in the helicopter to get out of there. Now, I just got to say, Sattler here is looking gorgeous. The makeup, the hair, the pose. I mean, she is looking fantastic. The rosy cheeks, the way the light's on her face. I mean, that tousled hair. She's looking great. You got to imagine that she literally touched a dead man's arm. She was chased by multiple dinosaurs that were like inches, seconds, milliseconds away from chomping her to bits and digesting her. She should be covered in sweat. She should be panting. She should be shaking from the adrenaline. But yet she is looking absolutely stunning in the helicopter ride. And why is that? Because she looks over to her partner, who gives a knowing glance first at the children and then to her. And he's telling her, okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. I finally get it. And of course, they turn and look out the window with the final shot of the birds as they fly away. And what does that mean? Well, I suppose the proper reading of it is he keeps referencing how dinosaurs became birds. And so, even though you might think that dinosaurs no longer exist, they never really needed to be brought back in the first place because they never left in the first place, right? He's worried about the destruction of his career. He's worried about an ego death, but he doesn't have to worry about the ego death because that transformation, that evolution that happens is something that he's ready to accept in himself, and he's ready for the next chapter of his life. Spielberg, I will just say, you missed up on a huge opportunity to make these storks. I mean, if they were storks, that would have just been really nailing it, but I digress. They see the birds, they realize, we don't need to bring back dinosaurs. They're already here. They're still here. And he says to himself, I'll still be here even after this chaos of children. And I've survived this, so I can surely survive that. Also, did I mention that there's no need for me to do my research anymore because it's totally obsolete? So might as well bring some other kind of meaning into life. And maybe that's not a great reason to have children, but needless to say, that's his arc. And that's his journey as they fly off into the sunset. We ought to remember that Spielberg, like I said, is wrestling with these ideas himself. This is a way of making a smash hit movie like he always does, a real gem of a film that really stands up even to this day. And many people talk about how this film still, in the world of, I'm sure as we see every release of Jurassic Park, the technology keeps getting better and better, but do the movies keep getting better and better, which is a nice parallel for this film. I mean, sure, the technology got better, but did life get any better? Do we really need the dinosaurs to come back? Of course not. So hopefully, if you stuck with me and watched this whole thing, you'll think that maybe, it is a bit crazy, and I am reading it until a bit much, but, that's what makes films so great, is that they can be interpreted in many ways, and I'm telling you, they don't make mistakes when they're at this level. They're putting these things in there, and films can be read in many ways, and that's what makes them still relevant, and that's why we're still talking about them to this day. It's hard to imagine that we'll still be talking about the sequels as much, because I just think that they lack those subtle cues, those moments. It's usually just like action beat to action beat, an excuse to be chased by dinosaurs, followed by another excuse to be chased by dinosaurs, and then a final last excuse to be chased by dinosaurs, which this film certainly does play. But, most of the film is in interpersonal relationships. If someone's life is going to be threatened, we want to be attached to that person, that character. So we have to care about that character. And how do we care about that character? Well, we have to get to know them on a base level. And what's more base than sex? What's more appealing than sexuality? But what's beautiful about this type of presentation of sexuality is that, of course, in every film, it's there. Usually some half-naked starlet is used to sell most films anyway. But that's not necessarily what they do, because even though sex is within the entirety of this film, it's not like, take Sattler's character, who's the only woman in the film, really, but she's not sexualized, and that's a great, she does show a lot of leg, but she's not sexualized in ways that you see in other films, which is nice, you know what I mean? And it's a great way of bringing up the topic of sex and sexual desire and reproduction and the consequences of, without making it explicitly about that, because as I said, it's sex and sexuality plays a part in every piece of media. I mean, you can't drive down the road without seeing a billboard. You can't open up your phone without seeing an ad. You can't open up social media without seeing, sexualized bodies everywhere to drive you to engage with the content. Although here with this film, it's the spectacle of the dinosaur which is driving you to engage with the content, and then you kind of absorb the messages of sex and sexuality therein. I think that's enough for this topic and me now. And I think I've done an exhaustive review. And yes, obviously it was a bit of a clickbait title, but I do think that those premises still are accurate and involved in the film. And hopefully you enjoyed it. So please like and subscribe and comment down below if I've missed anything, or if you already saw this already, or whatever you like. Engagement is good. And thank you.